remember being in primary school, especially, I don't know if it was just a Scottish thing, in primary school, and the teacher would be like, oh, we're doing, I don't know, gymnastics today, and you'd be like, yes, all buzzing, running around in your mad penny blacks. And then they would just pull out this death trap from the wall, and then the teacher would disappear. They would not be seen for at least 90 minutes, and they'd just be kids falling from 10 feet in the air on top of each other, left to do whatever you wanted. It was wild.
In one of our previous videos, The Secret Missing Chapter of Acts Revealed, we discussed Acts chapter 29, which is missing from the 66 books of the Bible. While there is debate concerning its legitimacy, you have to question why Acts was one of only 2 books in the New Testament that does not end with the words Amen. The other is the epistle of 3 John, just a very small correspondence. 1 John and 2 John do end with the word Amen. The book of Acts is different. It is obvious that there is something missing. It has an abrupt, incomplete ending. That void was filled with the discovery of the 29th chapter, which does end with Amen. The interesting part of this chapter is that it details Paul's intent to travel to Britain after he visits Spain. Paul was well aware of the Hebrew presence in Spain and apparently in Britannia. It is here that we will begin our story. Tacitus Dialogus Agricola Germania, pages 185-188. The geographical position of Britain and the races which inhabit it have been recorded by many writers. If I record them, it is not to challenge comparison in the matter of accuracy or talent, but because it was Agricola who first thoroughly subdued it. Accordingly, where earlier writers embroidered with rhetoric a theme still legendary, there will be found only a faithful narration of facts. Be this as it may, what race of mortal birth inhabited Britain originally, whether native to the soil or later comers, is a question which, as one would expect among barbarous people, has never received attention. The physique of the people presents many varieties, whence inferences are drawn. The red hair and the large limbs of the inhabitants of Caledonia proclaim their German origin. The swarthy faces of the Silures, the curly quality, in general, of their hair, and the position of Spain opposite their shores, attest the passage of Iberians, Latin, Hiberos, in old days, and the occupation by them of these districts.
Here, what is it with all these Americans just finding out about black Scottish content creators? This is genuine and real. Like, I feel so special right now. I'm looking through some of my comments and some of them are typing, but y'all exist. And I'm just like, aye, we do. There's black cunts in Scotland, mate, just normal cunts like me.
Israelites in Britain, the Jacobites, Jacobite. In British history, a supporter of the exiled Stuart king James II, in Latin, Jacobus, and his descendants after the Glorious Revolution of 1688. The movement was strong in Scotland, Wales, and Ireland, and it included Catholics and Anglican Tories. The Jacobites, especially under William III and Queen Anne, could offer a feasible alternative title to the crown, and several attempts were made to restore the Stuarts. In 1689, James II landed in Ireland, but his army was defeated at the Battle of the Boyne. In the 15 Rebellion 1715, led by John Erskine, 6th Earl of Mar, Jacobites tried to seize the crown for James Edward, the Old Pretender. In the 45 Rebellion 1745, Charles Edward, the Young Pretender, took Scotland, but the Jacobite army was crushed at the Battle of Culloden 1746. The third attempt, the 15 Rebellion, was a serious affair. In the summer of 1715, John Erskine, 6th Earl of Mar, an embittered ex-supporter of the Revolution, raised the Jacobite clans in the episcopal northeast for James III and VIII, James Edward, the Old Pretender. A hesitant leader, Mar advanced only as far as Perth and wasted a considerable amount of time before challenging the Duke of Argyle's smaller force. The result was the drawn Battle of Sheriffmuir, November 13, 1715, and at the same time the hopes of a southern rising melted away at Preston. James arrived too late to do anything but lead the flight of his chief supporters to France. The fourth Jacobite effort was a West Scottish Highland rising, aided by Spain, which was quickly aborted at Glenshiel, 1719. The final rebellion, the 45 Rebellion, has been heavily romanticized, but it was also the most formidable. The outlook in 1745 seemed hopeless, for another French invasion, planned for the previous year, had miscarried, and little help could be expected from that quarter. The number of Scottish Highlanders prepared to turn out was smaller than in 1715, and the lowlands were apathetic or hostile, but the charm and daring of the young prince, Charles Edward, later called the Young Pretender or Bonnie Prince Charlie, and the absence of the government troops who were fighting on the continent produced a more dangerous rising. Within a few weeks, Charles was master of Scotland and victor of Preston Pans, September 21st, and, though utterly disappointed as regards an English rising, he marched south as far as Derby in England, December 4th, and won another battle, Falkirk, January 17, 1746, before retreating to the Highlands. The end came on April 16th, when William Augustus, Duke of Cumberland, crushed the Jacobite army at the Battle of Culloden, near Inverness. About 80 of the rebels were executed. Many more were hunted down and wantonly killed or driven into exile, and Charles, hounded for months by government searching parties, barely escaped to the continent September 20th.
Guys, honestly, I love you Americans so much. Like, I'm so happy that you're intrigued to know what it's like to live in Scotland and stuff, and you've found my TikTok and you've found other people's TikToks. So I've seen all your questions and you guys have so much.
Jacobite Gleanings by J. Macbeth Forbes. We get a glimpse as to the fate of the vanquished Jacobites. In these trying times, the authorities had not to substantiate a man's guilt. He had to prove his own innocence before they would set him free from confinement. Should he complain, he had the option presented to him, if able-bodied, of serving His Majesty at home or abroad, in the army or navy. Then they were allowed to draw lots who were not distinguished by any degree of guilt, and were not men of note. Those fortunate enough to draw the blank lot had to petition for pardon, which they received on condition of transportation to our colonies in America, there to serve and remain during the term of their natural lives, on the same conditions as laid down in 1715. As the lot fell on one man of the rank and file out of 20, it follows that 19/20ths of the whole were marked out for transportation, the sickly and infirm being of course excepted from the number. Transportation is said to have been first invented by the Privy Council in the reign of Charles II, and it became an acknowledged form of punishment under the Act of 1701, which defines transportation as a proper legal sentence. In the reign of Charles II, the times were such that rebellions were rife, and the government could hardly put every rebel to death. Principle and policy alike forbade that. The authorities were as powerless in this respect as Nero, who wished that all Rome had but one head, that he might cut it off at a single blow. Sir George Mackenzie, in his vindication of Charles the Lionel's government, says, "As to sending people away to the plantations, none were sent away but such as were taken at Bothwell Bridge or in Argyle's rebellion, and the turning capital punishment into exile was an act of clemency, not of cruelty." Cromwell deported his royalist prisoners so that it was not confined to one section of the community more than another. As to the clemency of transportation, Burton talks of the 700 rebel prisoners taken at Preston and sold as slaves to the West Indian merchants in 1716. He says, "It is painful to see on the lists the many Highland names followed by laborer. Implicit obedience had been their crime, and in many instances they had been forced into the service for which they were punished, as absolutely as the French conscript or the British pressed seamen. The colonies and plantations had been for some time back the dumping ground for undesirables of all kinds, convicts. state criminals, whether political or religious, rebels, suspects, malcontents, fanatics, and deserters. Dr. Bobber Chambers states that after the Restoration, a royal fishery company, with a capital of $25,000 sterling, was started as a rival to the Dutch, and that amongst the most notable uses for shipping in the reign of the restored Stuart were privateering against the Dutch and the transporting of poor people to Barbados and of discontented West Country Presbyterians to the American colonies. A valuable publication referring to an earlier century's emigrants and including those whose passages were assisted by the government of the day is that by John Camden Houghton, London, 1874, entitled Original Lists of Persons of Quality, Emigrants, Religious Exiles, Political Rebels, and others who went from Great Britain to the American plantations, 1600 to 1700. These, and those who came after them in the 15 and the 45, were among the willing or unwilling pioneers of the colonization movement, in which even army deserters had a place. An exact list and description of 150 rebel prisoners shipped at Liverpool on board the veteran John Rickey, master, for the Leeward Islands, which were taken near Antigua the 28th of June last by the diamond privateer Paul Marsala, commander, and carried into Martinico the 30th of June, 1747. I will save this list for the end of the video. This will be just a sample of the names and descriptions of the exiled Jacobites. Please stay until the end. I think you will find the description of these Jacobites, these Scottish and Irish supporters of the House of Stuart, quite eye-opening. But let's continue with story. The list is taken from 3 different jails, Lincoln, York, and Lancaster, and it is likely that the first 46 prisoners, whose names are all alphabetically arranged, would come from Lincoln, the other names from York and Lancaster being inserted without any regard to sequence. Of the 135 men, 18 hailed from Perthshire, 20 from Inverness, 25 from Aberdeen, 19 from England, and 1 from Ireland. As to the trades represented, 55 were labourers, 11 servants, 20 weavers, 4 herdsmen, 2 gentlemen, Vismore, No. 105, John Mackenzie, 22, Rossshire, well-made, genteel, and No. 111, John Ostler, 20, Lincoln's brown hair, genteel. There was an Edinburgh writer, George Hume, age 30, marked as a black man, whose color would no doubt suit the West Indies. 104, a laborer, is noted as having his own hair. A wig was hardly to be expected from one of his class or his age. He was only 32. Then there is a fiddler from Inverness, of but 16 years and 5'14" feet in height, who is happily characterized as sprightly. The following other occupations were represented: sailor, watchmaker, carpenter, whitesmith, peddler, tallow chandler, hosier, maltster, shoemaker, baker, bookbinder, flax dresser, nail-maker, glover, gardener, cook, tailor, husbandman, ploughboy, cowherd, cordwainer, and last but not least 2 barbers. 92, Walter Minnis, would probably be Walter Menzies. 5 of them were pock-pitted, and not one of them all was 6 feet in height. As many as 60 were under 20 years of age. The island of Martinico, or Martinique, into which the prisoners were carried, was in French possession, though taken from the French 15 years later by Admiral Rodney, to whom its Governor-General de la Touche capitulated. It was the chief of all the Leeward Islands owned by the French, and was the residence of the ruler of the French settlements in the West Indies. It was quite typical of the other islands in its character and products. Its exports were sugar, cotton, cocoa, aloes, coffee, cassia, etc., and the climate was more adapted to blacks than whites. The island was recently the scene of a terribly disastrous volcanic disturbance, which came suddenly with appalling and devastating destruction to life and property. In 1747 it was a sally port for French privateers in the West Indian seas, just as the island of Bourbon was to French pirates in the Indian Ocean. As the articles of the 1762 capitulation make no reference to the 150 prisoners in course of transportation, it is to be presumed that they had previously quitted the island. The captured vessel was duly claimed from the French in January 1748, but they peremptorily declined to hand over it or the prisoners to the British government. They were then asked to include the latter in the next cartel for the exchange of prisoners, and again they refused to enter any engagement implying the return of the unfortunates to English servitude. What the fate of these prisoners, these twice taken captives, ultimately was, does not transpire from the official papers. Let us hope they achieved their liberty and returned to their native land in happier times. Although the transported Jacobites were almost entirely confined to the rank and file, the private men, as they were termed, yet some of the higher grades would have been thankful to escape death even by the highway of transportation.
Join me as I dive into the mysterious history of the Jacobite prisoners exiled to America and try to uncover what really happened to them. In this video, you'll explore the fate of Jacobite prisoners who were sent to America following their rebellion against the British Crown, and how their experiences shaped their new lives. The Jacobite risings of the 18th century were a series of rebellions aimed at restoring the Stuart dynasty to the British throne. However, after the final defeat at Culloden in 1746, many Jacobite prisoners were taken captive and sentenced to transportation to America. These men and women faced an uncertain future, torn from their homeland and forced to adapt to a completely foreign land. Life as a transported Jacobite prisoner was incredibly challenging. Many were subjected to harsh conditions on the long voyage across the Atlantic, only to be sold into indentured servitude upon arrival. Their daily lives were marked by hard labor, meager rations, and little comfort. The struggle to survive in a new and unforgiving environment was a daily battle. Despite these difficulties, the Jacobite prisoners persevered, relying on their skills and resourcefulness to build new lives. They worked as farmers, traders, and craftsmen, slowly establishing themselves in their adopted communities. Their experiences, though marked by hardship, laid the foundations for a new generation of Scottish Americans. As we explore the stories of individual prisoners, we find tales of remarkable resilience and determination. Men like James McGregor, who became a prominent figure in the American colonies, and women like Agnes MacDonald, who built a new life as a successful businesswoman. Their contributions to American society were significant, and their Scottish heritage had a lasting impact on local cultures. The Jacobite prisoners brought with them their language, customs, and traditions, which they adapted and integrated into their new surroundings. They established communities that maintained strong ties to their Scottish roots, influencing the development of American culture in lasting ways. From music and dance to literature and art, the Scottish legacy of the Jacobite prisoners continues to be felt. One pivotal moment that significantly impacted the lives of these prisoners was their involvement in the American Revolution. Many Scottish Americans, descended from the Jacobite prisoners, played key roles in the fight for independence. Their experiences as outsiders, struggling to adapt to a new land, gave them a unique perspective on the struggle for freedom. The formation of communities was another crucial aspect of their lives. As the Jacobite prisoners settled in America, they formed close-knit communities that provided support and solidarity in the face of adversity. These communities allowed them to maintain their cultural heritage and pass it down to future generations. The stories of individual prisoners and their contributions to American society serve as a testament to the resilience and determination of these men and women. Their experiences, though marked by hardship and struggle, ultimately shaped the course of American history. In summary, the Jacobite prisoners exiled to America demonstrated remarkable resilience in the face of overwhelming adversity. Their experiences shaped their new lives, and their lasting legacy continues to influence American culture to this day. If you've enjoyed this video, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Be sure to check out my other videos on Scottish history and its impact on the world.
Lions Coloring Book for Kids, Volume 2. Available August 15, 2025 on Amazon. The Bible Lions Coloring Book for Children. Color 30 fun designs of inspirational verses and Christian artwork. A beautiful children's coloring book designed to fill your child's mind with the positive words of God's love. The Bible Lions coloring book for kids was designed to be a fun yet effective way to help children calm their tension. Hand-lettered quotes and adorable hand-designed illustrations will inspire your child as they reflect on God's promises.